Hello, everybody. It's Tyler with 3D Printing Basics. If you guys were interested in getting every single episode of this podcast, 3D Printing Basics, ad-free and a week early, and also getting exclusive perks such as exclusive episodes that only you can listen to and more, then subscribe on Patreon. My link will be down below. I would really appreciate it if you guys would consider supporting me. All the support I've already received has meant the world to me, so thank you guys so much. If not, no worries. Continue to consume these episodes for free, and I appreciate you listening regardless. So thank you guys very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 100. That is just a crazy thing to say. I never even thought when I started this podcast, I knew I wanted it to go for a while, but I truly didn't expect it to get to 100 episodes. But I just wanted to kind of take this time and just say thank you to, if you're watching, if you're listening. You know, I wouldn't be here without you. The whole reason I wanted to make this podcast way back in 2023 when I got started was because I saw a gap in the podcasting area. All of the 3D printing podcasts that I had been listening to, everything that I had kind of been consuming, were all really advanced, and even I didn't understand some of what was going on. So I knew if I had tried to listen to these podcasts back when I was just getting started in 3D printing, I would have really had no clue what they were talking about. So, you know, it was something that I really wanted to kind of make this podcast and fill that gap and make something that was very beginner centered and beginner focused, and kind of creating these easy to consume quick episodes that are really easy to kind of binge or just watch, even on your drive to work. If you just have 10-15 minutes in your day and you can just listen to this and gain something from it, that's kind of what I wanted this whole 3D printing basics experience to be. And I've been really happy with how this show has progressed over the last 100 episodes. I feel like I've grown as a podcaster, a person, just overall in general. I feel like I've grown a lot. I've definitely taken some feedback, both good feedback and some constructive criticism from you guys, the listener. There's been lots of comments left on all my episodes, and I've read each and every one of them, and I've taken each one to heart. It's helped me make some adjustments to this show that have made it better. I've made whole episodes just based off the listener questions that you guys have asked me. And there's just so much that goes into this that just would not be possible if you guys weren't listening in every single week. So I just wanted to really say from the bottom of my heart on this 100th episode of 3D Printing Basics, thank you guys for checking in pretty much every single week for the last 3 or 2 years and just listening. You know, it really means the world to me that so many of you would be willing to take time out of your day to hear me talk about 3D printing. You know, it's not even something that I really thought was possible when I was getting started, and just the support that I've been continuing to receive over these last few years it's been unbelievable, and I've been so blessed and so thankful. And yeah, I really appreciate every single one of you out there. So, you know, I don't know where this podcast is going to go. I definitely have some ideas for what I want it to be, but I know I will keep making episodes, and I will keep trying to educate the beginner 3D printer, whether you are just getting into it, you don't even own a 3D printer, or whether you're like me and you have your own business but still want to pick up some skills along the way. My goal is to be here every Friday for you guys to listen or to watch, and to just kind of gain the knowledge that I think everybody needs in order to become a successful 3D printer. So yeah, with that being said, you know, just one more big thank you to you guys, and let's go ahead and get right into today's episode. All right, so for this special episode, I was just kind of thinking that we would just in general kind of run over the timeline of this podcast and kind of where we were when we started and where we are now. Yeah, so when I first started this podcast, I actually wasn't 3D printing full-time. I was still working a full-time job. For those of you who were listening in the early days, I was a machinist. And I was listening to podcasts. I listen to podcasts all the time during work, and I had just gotten into listening to 3D printing podcasts. And just about every one that I listened to, it was really complicated. They were advanced in the 3D printing world. They were definitely very well versed. I remember there was one where these guys were running their own 3D printers that they built from scratch, and then there was a lot of businesses that obviously knew the ins and outs of just about every 3D printer, but they were very technical when they were talking about it. And just the way that they talked about it was very complex. It wasn't easy for me to digest, and that's not at all talking bad on these podcasts. They're fantastic podcasts. I would recommend all of them. I think 3D Printing Today was probably my favorite podcast that I listened to. But as for me, I looked at it as like, oh, if somebody was getting into 3D printing or they had never done it before, they might not understand what these guys are talking about. And as I looked, I probably listened to a few different podcasts, and there wasn't really that many out there to begin with. And then, like I said, the ones that were out there were fairly complex. I kind of saw the hole in the market of, there wasn't really a podcast about 3D printing that was geared specifically towards the beginner. There wasn't an episode, or excuse me, there wasn't a podcast that was breaking down, what to do with your first 3D printer or how to work it or the ins and outs of slicing, designing, filaments, anything like that. And so that was a pretty big hole for me that I sought to fill. That's the whole reason I started this podcast, and that's why it's called 3D Printing Basics. I wanted it to be about the basics of 3D printing, and that's where I wanted it to be. And so when we started out, these episodes were extremely informational. They were completely scripted. I wrote the entire script beforehand, and I followed that script pretty much line by line, word by word. I did not venture off too much from the script at all. And it was very informational. It was very quick, very concise episodes, which still rings true today. I try to keep all the episodes in between 10 and 15 minutes. My goal there, always from the beginning, I always wanted to keep the episodes short just because I wanted to keep the topics concise. I didn't want to spend an hour talking about 10 different topics when I could take one episode and spend 10 minutes getting really in depth about one specific topic. So that was kind of the thought process there. And then, that was kind of the start. The first one was the introduction, telling you about who I am, what I'm doing, the goal of the podcast. And then we got into the history of 3D printing, which is actually my most popular episode, was the 3D printing history episodes. Those ones are really popular and still get a lot of plays today, which is really nice. And then we got into FDM versus SLA 3D printing. We got into PLA filament, PETG filament. And the first 10 to 15 episodes did really well. I remember I was honestly surprised about how many people were tuning in and listening, because I wasn't doing like marketing. I wasn't putting myself out there. I still don't market myself too much. I don't even have an Instagram for this podcast specifically. And it was doing really well. And so that kind of format stayed. I remember it stayed specifically until about episode 20, I believe it was. It was the interview I did with Nico Industries. And that one was a longer one. It was my first interview podcast that I did. It was about 45 or 50 minutes long, and it was completely unscripted. I had some general questions that I wanted to ask him, but other than that, we were just talking back and forth, just about the general topics. And that podcast kind of changed the format for me a little bit. It made me realize that I wanted the podcast to be informational. Of course, I wanted it to stay the same way. I didn't want it to change at all, but I wanted it to come from my insight. I wanted to give more opinions, and I wanted it to feel like it was coming from me and not just from a robot. And so that's when I got away from the heavily scripted, the word for word kind of the robot sort of just kind of speaking back to you. And that's when it turned a little more personable. And I still have outlines. It's not like I'm coming up with these things completely by myself or completely off the top of my head. There are still outlines. If you see me glancing over here, it's because I'm actually glancing at my outline. And I just kind of started going from there. And so for probably the next 20 to 80, from probably episode 20 to episode 80, there was definitely kind of finding my voice there, finding the style that I like to produce, kind of the, just the overall format that I was happy with. I got rid of the background music, which, if you remember, I used to have background music on my episodes. I don't have the music anymore. It's just going to be me talking. And then the episodes kind of stayed the same. They were very informational, still about niche topics. I did a lot about CAD design. I've done some specialty filament designs, and I still did some interviews, although not as many as I would have liked to. That's one of my big goals for 2026 and the kind of the next episodes of this podcast is to get some more interviews in. Yeah, and then after episode 80 or around that time, that's when I really kind of started to settle in and find myself. I think there was kind of a stark difference that I really started giving more opinions and I started leaning more into who I am and what I'm about and sharing personal insights more so. And that just came with, getting more comfortable. With the support that I received, there was so much support I was already receiving, but I think that was kind of when I was really getting comfortable behind the microphone. I know, it's crazy to think like after 80 episodes, I still wasn't comfortable. But that's when I really started to kind of settle in and just kind of deliver these podcasts pretty much exactly how I wanted to deliver them. When I envisioned creating this podcast and I envisioned what the episodes would be, it's a lot like how they are now with the general outline and then, my own insights and combined with professional research to deliver you an entertaining, short form informational clip that you could even listen to on your drive to work. You can listen to it while walking your dog. And, every single episode, you're going to get something out of it. And that was kind of my main goal. And I'm really happy with how the podcast has turned out. It's something that I'm proud to produce and I'm proud to put out there, for anyone to listen to every single week. And yeah, I'm super happy with where it's at. And so now that I'm happy with where it's at, I want to talk about where I want it to go. And I know I mentioned it before, but yeah, more interviews is kind of it's the main thing that I'm focusing on in 2026 and kind of as we shift into the next 100 episodes, if you will. I want to get a lot more interviews in. I definitely like having people from all over the industry to kind of share their insights. And I'm definitely wanting to do more of those, and so that's definitely going to be my goal. I've already reached out to a few companies and a few people specifically to try and get them on, and I've received some positive feedback, so I definitely think that there are going to be some interviews here rather shortly. I'm not going to say who they are yet, just in case, but I'm definitely hoping and expecting some good interviews to come out very, very soon. And yeah, other than that, there's not too much that I want to change. Obviously, the video podcast is kind of a big change. I don't really know why I decided to just kind of switch to video podcasts. I just wanted to reach more people. I know some people won't listen to podcasts unless they can also watch them. So I just wanted to kind of open up that avenue for people who were interested in the podcast but didn't necessarily want to listen. And so that was definitely a big change for me and something that I'm pretty happy with so far. I've enjoyed this aspect of it, this kind of new ruffle in the feathers of this podcast, but I've definitely enjoyed it. And other than that, just kind of keeping it the same short form informational podcast that you guys still get a lot from. And yeah, I mean, I'm really happy. I definitely want to, I don't know if you can see right there, the Patreon supporters there, my top supporters right there. I want to lean a little bit more into some bonus content. I just want to make sure that the people who have graciously decided to support me to feel like they are getting the full experience or that they're getting their money's worth. And so I'm trying to kind of figure out what else I can do. We have of course, every episode releases a week early on Patreon, and then they get monthly bonus episodes for the top tiers right there. Those guys get exclusive access to a monthly bonus episode every single month. So yeah, it's just, it's a work in progress, and I think this podcast will continue to be a work in progress as long as I make episodes. I don't think I'll ever be able to get it to a finished product of sort, but I don't think that's what it's supposed to be, but I'm very, very happy with how these 100 episodes have gone. They've really flown by. I can't believe we're here already, but I am very, very happy with how things have gone. I'm very happy with the podcast itself, and I'm just so grateful to be in this spot, to be able to produce these episodes and have an audience of people who listen to me and who look forward to my episodes every single week. And the nice comments that I always get and the support is just unwavering. And it really means a lot to me. So I just wanted to thank you guys again. I know I've thanked you guys 100 times for listening to the podcast, but I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to do it 100 more times every single episode because I really am thankful and grateful that you guys tune into this podcast every single week. So yeah, that's going to conclude the 100th episode of 3D Printing Basics. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, there's going to be the form down below. If you guys have some questions or comments or maybe an episode idea for me, I will definitely I'm always looking at that form, and I'm definitely getting to the point where there's enough questions that are piling up that I can make a whole episode about it. So I definitely think that I will. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you on episode 101. So I'll talk to you guys next time.